Can you make good pictures with this little thing? We're going to talk about Pancake lenses on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions. Don't forget to go to AskDavidBergman.com. Ask your own photo questions right there on the site. I just might pick it to answer here on a future show. Speaking of future shows, you're joining me on a very special day. Today is my 100th episode of Ask David Bergman. I'm very proud of that. Thank you guys so much for sending in those questions and continuing to send them in. I sincerely appreciate you watching every week. If you add that to the 150 plus episodes I did of 2-minute tips for Adorama TV, that's over 5 years I've been here doing weekly episodes on Adorama TV. Thank you so much for continuing to watch. It does mean a lot to me. I also have to take a second to thank the team at Adorama, the behind the scenes team. They work really hard to put this together. Adorama itself funds this. They allow us to do these shows for you every single week, myself and all of the other photo hosts on Adorama TV. I hope you're aware, but if you're not, Adorama is actually a physical brick and mortar store based in New York City. If you have learned anything from Adorama TV over the years, please consider buying from them. They sell photo and video gear. They sell musical equipment, computers, business essentials, all kinds of electronics. They don't tell us to promote the store, that we just want to put out good photo content for you guys. But as this is my 100th episode, I just wanted to really put that out there. I buy all of my gear at Adorama. I hope that you guys will consider it as well. If there's something in a show that you like and an Adorama TV show that you like, there are usually links down below that'll take you right there. If not, tell your friends, spread the word. Adorama is the place to go. I certainly appreciate it, and all of us do as well. All right, let's get to today's show. I got a question from Cory S, and Cory wants to know, what's your thought on using a DSLR with a Pancake lens? All right, a Pancake lens. What is a Pancake lens? Well, this is an example of a Pancake lens. Usually what we're referring to is a small, flat lens, like a pancake, right? They make these for a lot of different camera companies, make these for their cameras. This one is Canon. I'm a Canon shooter, so usually when I talk about gear, I'm talking about the Canon stuff, but be aware that they do make Pancake lenses for most camera systems, probably whatever you're shooting as well. It's kind of funny because the camera companies themselves don't actually use the term pancake, right? It's just a lens. That's a term that we've just come up with to define these small, generally inexpensive lenses. Now, most pancakes are going to be prime lenses because they have fewer lens elements, and that helps keep costs down. There are a few zoom pancakes, but definitely less common. Most also are going to be in that wide to normal focal length range from something like 18 millimeters to maybe up to 40 millimeters or so. And prices are going to vary, but usually they're around $200 or even less, which is kind of nice. Here's the thing. This is the 22 millimeter f2 EF-M lens. It's for the Canon M system. I bought this lens to use with my M50, and this is a nice small system. I think there's a Mark II now, the M50 Mark II. This particular lens is going to have a 1.6 crop compared to full frame 35 millimeter size cameras. So this is going to give me about a 35 millimeter field of view, same field of view as a 35 millimeter. I love that focal length. That's why one of the reasons I chose to buy this particular lens. But if you have another system, you just have to look at, the one that works in your focal range. So for example, again, with the Canon system, they make 3 pancakes. They make this one for the M system. They make an EF-EOS lens, which is a 24 millimeter, which with 1.6 crop is going to be about 38 millimeters. And for full frame, they make a 40 millimeter 2.8. That's obviously 40 millimeters. So they're all in about that same 35 to 40 millimeter range. That's a pretty common focal length for pancake lenses. And that's a nice wide angle, right? It's a little wider than a normal lens, like a 50, but it's a good, I like that range, that wide angle range, just for like a street camera to carry around. Now, as far as size, you can see this thing is about half the size. This is the kit lens that came with the M50. It's the 15 to 45 zoom lens, and it's about half the size. So especially when you put it on the body itself, this whole setup is tiny, right? Very small, very easy to carry around. Now, what are the pros and cons of using a pancake lens? The pros, I already mentioned, it's small, it's lightweight. This thing literally fits in my pocket, my jacket pocket. I can't do that with any of my other cameras, so I can always have this thing with me. Pancake lenses are also sharp. They're really known as being very sharp lenses because there aren't a lot of lens elements moving around in there, like in a big zoom lens, for example. This 22mm EF-M lens has 7 lens elements in it. That's not a lot, right? The 24-70 EF 2.8, just for comparison, has 21. There's just a lot of stuff moving around inside that lens. So because of that, pretty simple lens, optically speaking, so it's going to be super sharp. Pancakes generally are very, very sharp. Another benefit, it's a prime lens. If you like prime lenses, they're really kind of fun to shoot with. You have to zoom with your feet, right? You literally have to move in and out to be able to change your composition, and it really makes you consider and compose your images more carefully than if you just kind of lazily stand there and zoom in and out. Zoom lenses certainly have their place. I have plenty of them, but for this kind of photography, it's kind of nice. Some people say it's a bit more authentic or organic to be able to shoot with a prime lens. It's kind of more how our eyes see, and just to be able to move in and out changes the experience a little bit. So that is definitely a benefit of a Pancake lens as well. Also, minimum focusing distance, usually very good. On Pancakes, this 22mm, you can focus as close as just under 6 inches, which is really, really close. You could even put extension tubes on there if you want to focus closer than that, but kind of defeats the purpose of a Pancake lens at that point. But you could do it if you want. 6 inches is very close, much closer than some of the bigger brother lenses, some of the bigger versions. Also, it's inconspicuous. Carrying this thing around, it doesn't scare people, right? If I was doing just photographing one-on-one with somebody and we were just sitting around one day and I wanted to just snap some pictures, it's a lot different than pulling out the big 1DX Mark III and a 70-200 or 24-70. And that lens is intimidating and this is not. So just being able to blend in with the environment is really, really nice if that's the kind of photography you're doing. Of course, if I'm on a big photo shoot and I've got lights and there are art directors and everybody standing around, that's going to be a different situation. But for that kind of photography, when I'm just want to be inconspicuous, it's definitely the way to go. And lastly, yeah, they're budget friendly. They're generally going to be less expensive than a bigger comparable lens. Now, what are the downsides of Pancakes? Well, the size might be a downside for you. If you like to really the heft and the weight of a big lens and camera, I mean, when I shoot sports or I shoot action and I'm using a 1DX Mark III and a big long lens, I like that stability. It feels just feels, it's got some size to it, some heft. I like that feeling, but that's the gear I'm going to use for that kind of a shoot. Like I said, if I'm just sitting around and want to photograph my friends or family, I don't want to pull out a big camera like that. I'm probably not going to pull out a big camera like that. So that weight could be a pro, could be a con, depending on what you're shooting. What else? Some of them don't have manual focus rings, the ring on it to be able to focus manually. Most people don't focus manually, but if you're the kind of person that likes to, make sure your lens has one. This one does, but some of them do not because they're just so simple, small lenses that they don't even have space for them. They're also not as fast as their bigger prime equivalents. For example, you can get a 50 1.2, right? They don't make a 1.2 Pancake lens. Of course, that 50 1.2 is going to be huge and very expensive, so it's a completely different thing. Now, a nifty 50, which is usually considered to be a 50 1.8, that lens is going to be cheaper. It's $125, and it's 1 1/3 stops brighter than most 2.8 Pancake lenses. I actually got this particular 22 purposely because it's an f2, which is really nice. It's going to give me that shallow depth of field. I'm closer to a nifty 50 than a 2.8 Pancake lens would. But if I was to get the Canon EF equivalent of this lens, which would be a 35mm 2.0 lens, it's $600, right? Now, of course, that's an L series USM lens. It's a completely different beast, but I'm getting the same focal length and the same aperture for 1/3 the price. So that's kind of nice. What else? There's no distance scale. If you're a landscape photographer and you like to see that distance scale, or you're calculating hyperfocal distance manually, you can usually look at that on the lens. Most Pancakes, I don't think any Pancakes actually have a distance scale. Not a big deal for most photographers, but if that's something that's important to you, then you should be aware of that. Also, could be a downside that it is only one focal length and not a zoom. this is not going to be enough for every possible photographic situation you're going to come across. You're going to need to supplement with other gear that you probably already have. But you know, a zoom might be better in some cases, depending on what you shoot. This would be a good second lens, right? So this is your carry around small lens that you just, you know, use for street photography and that kind of thing. But if you're, you know, you need a particular focal length for something else, then obviously you're going to get that zoom, or you're going to get whatever you need for that use. Lastly, build quality. Many of them are plastic because they are so inexpensive. Some are metal. This one is some kind of metal composite. But they're not going to have the same coatings that the big brothers have, that their big, you know, the big comparable lenses are going to have. And they're not going to have the same weather sealing. It's just not going to be made exactly the same. Although, again, your mileage may vary depending on what you get. As far as image quality, I'm kind of neutral on Pancake lens image quality. Of course, like I said, they're not going to have the same coatings as the more expensive lenses. If you're the kind of person who only wants the best, let's say you're selling fine art, you're making giant prints, you're going to use, in the Canon system, you're going to use the L series USM lenses. That's just what you're going to get. However, the image quality, I will say, on these lenses is really darn good. Like I said before, they're very, very sharp. So most people are not going to notice a difference in image quality unless you're one of those extreme pixel peepers who's going to zoom into 4,000% and really look at every single pixel. But most people are never really going to notice the difference. Now, what would you use a Pancake lens for? I think if you're a minimalist, if you're just somebody who likes to carry around one small little camera, it's going to be perfect for you. It's absolutely going to be the lightest, smallest way to go on a small mirrorless body. Great setup. If you're a street photographer, it's sort of the perfect walk-around lens. You're more likely to take this thing with you than you are to bring out a big DSLR, for example. If you just want to quickly grab shots of your friends or family, either at home or you're on vacation, and you really don't want to use your phone, right? Because you're going to step up your image quality when you go up to a camera like this, you know, a DSLR from your phone. The thing is, with this small lightweight thing, you're getting all the benefits of a DSLR without pulling out, let's say, a 1DX Mark III. You're getting a bigger sensor than a phone, right? You're going to get that shallow optical depth of field, not a computer-generated depth of field. You're going to get better dynamic range, all of those things that a DSLR gives you without, you know, having to pull out that big camera body, and it fits in your pocket just like a phone does. It's a decent portrait lens, right? Because of that wide aperture, you can throw your depth of field really out of focus in the background. You can throw your background out of focus with a shallow depth of field. So having that wider aperture, even 2.8 or f2, those are pretty wide apertures. So that's going to be a decent portrait lens. It's definitely better in a lot of ways than the kit lens, mostly because of that aperture. The kit lens, this one, for example, I believe is a 6.3 at the zoom end at 45 millimeters. So most kit lenses are going to be 5.6 or so. This thing's f2. Most Pancakes are around 2.8. So it's definitely going to be a step up from that kit lens. Now, I admit personally, I overlooked Pancake lenses for years. I really thought it was just kind of a toy, especially with the big cameras that I use on my photo shoots. But since buying this one, I've really grown to like it. It's the perfect complement to this smaller mirrorless camera. This is the M50. There's the M50 Mark II now. It really is a nice small system. Here in my office in New York City, my apartment is a couple blocks away, and I walk back and forth every day. And at night when I go home, I've been carrying this thing. It's super easy to carry. It literally fits in my jacket pocket, and I can just photograph anything on the street that I normally wouldn't even take a second glance at, right? Whatever's happening out on the street. There were some flowers for sale in a store window. All the garbage around New York City. There's so much garbage now, especially these days, more than normal. And even if I want to do a quick self-portrait when I'm in the elevator, it's really easy for me just to pull this thing out and get that better image quality and the advantages of a DSLR without using my phone. I even prefer this Pancake over a nifty 50 because I like a little wider angle. I don't usually shoot at 50 millimeters, so it's a personal preference, but this being around 35 millimeter equivalent of that field of view, I like that as my sort of carry around lens. Look, for most people, this is going to be a really great, inexpensive way to add a prime lens to your kit and you can always have it with you. You get all those benefits. So take a look at Pancake lenses if you never have before, like me. Thanks, Cory, for sending that question. I hope that answered it. Remember, if you have your own photo question, go to AskDavidBergman.com. There's a form there you can submit. Also, I normally host a series of live concert photography workshops at a real concert. Hopefully we'll be doing those again by the end of 2021. But I'm also hosting online workshops in the meantime. You can get all kinds of information about my workshops at shootfromthepit.com. That's shootfromthepit.com. And remember, if you're interested in buying a Pancake lens or anything else, photo, video, computers, musical equipment, please use the links below. Go to Adorama.com. Thank them for continuing to do Adorama TV for all of these years. It means a lot to all of us. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm back here every Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern. I will be back here next week with episode 101. Please join me back for another episode of Ask David Bergman.